take a minute more, then we'll do the questions. Okay, let's come to the questions. Question 1, it can be understood from the passage that the author would most likely agree with, right? It's author most likely agreeing with something, right? What is posthumanism? Right? What is posthumanism? So there was something discussed as humanism, and then there was another philosophy discussed as posthumanism, right? So what is the author most likely to agree with? See, it cannot be options 1 and 2, because options 1 and 2, where it says expansion of humanism and embellishment, embellish means something more operative or to make something more attractive, maybe, right? Both of these cannot be answers. Why? Because both of these imply that post-humanism is similar to humanism, right? That is what these two options imply, which is wrong, right? Post-humanism is completely different as compared to humanism, right? Where do I know that from? Because it says, as with most titles that begin with the prefix post, post-humanism is not a unified movement, but a set of movements that repudiate humanism. Repudiate, right? Repudiate means to refuse to accept, right? Repudiate means to refuse to accept, right? So post-humanism does not accept humanism, right? Options 1 and 2. Now, the close options are 3 and 4, right? 3 and 4 are close options. Invalidation of humanism, antithesis to humanism. Now, as discussed on the previous slide, okay, sorry. On the previous slide, the term that was mentioned was repudiate, which is to refuse to accept. And then in the passage, what is happening is those three philosophies that have been discussed, they provide a different perspective. Right? It refuses to accept humanism, and then there's a different perspective that is provided, which is why the best option is option 4, antithesis to humanism. Right? Antithesis basically refers to the exact opposite, or it could refer to something that provides an opposition. Right? Something that is either the exact opposite or something that provides an opposition. So here, why I'm going with option 4 is because of the second implication, right? The opposition that it provides to the concept of humanism. Just understand what invalidation means. Invalidation means to prove that something is incorrect or false. Right? To prove that something is incorrect or false. That is validation. Here, the theory of post-humanism, right? The three philosophies that have been discussed, they are not proving that humanism is false. They're just providing a different perspective, which is why option 4 is a better option than the third one. Had option 4 not been there, option 3 would have been correct. Had option 4 not been there, right? But between options 3 and 4, option 4 is a better option. Proving that it's wrong. It's just saying the opposite, right? I'm sorry, it's just providing opposition, right? That's all. On the whole, I would say that this was not an easy question because of options 3 and 4, right? Because of option 3 also being there, I would not call this an easy question, but yes, at least options 1 and 2 were easy to eliminate, right? Options 1 and 2 were easy to eliminate. So it was a choice only between options 3 and 4. Question difference. It can be logically inferred from the passage that essentialism would be like which one of the following. This question is about essentialism, right? This question is about essentialism. What is discussed in the passage is anti-essentialism, right? So that is the first that you're clear about. What is discussed is anti-essentialism. This question is about essentialism. So basically, your correct answer should be the opposite of what has been discussed in the passage, right? What has been discussed in the passage? What does the passage say about essentialism? That humanism sought to overcome the particularities of creed and culture with an appeal to universal human values. This is what humanism did. But anti-essentialism, right? So anti-essentialism condemned the premise of a universal human nature, right? So anti-essentialism condemned universal human nature. So if I talk about essentialism will be something that derived humanism, right? And humanism supported universal human values, which is why the answer is option 2, right? Which is why the answer is option 2. Human traits have a universal validity. This is the important part, because anti-essentialism was against the concept of universalism, right? So if I take the opposite of anti-essentialism, which is essentialism, that will support universal validity, right? Option 1 says human traits are socially created constructs independent of collective universal essence. This is exactly the opposite, right? Because this, to a certain extent, is what anti-essentialism is about, right? This question is about essentialism. So option 1 cannot be the answer. Option 3 says the natural outcome of the moral characters born by social interactions is not correct. We have to talk about something that's universal in nature. Option 4 talks about human traits do not adhere to any common notion of any identity considered universal. It says do not adhere to what is considered universal, right? This is again contradictory, right? For the same reason as for the first option, right? So the answer here is option 2. Question 3, which one of the following best describes the function of the last paragraph? Okay, before that, right? Before that, this question I'll categorize as an easy question, right? Question 2, I'll categorize that as an easy question. Question 3 says, which one of the following best describes the function of the last paragraph? This is an example of what we call a logical structure question, right? A logical To answer a logical structure question, it helps if you have a mind map of the passage. Then most of the batches, especially J1 to J6, I have done the concept of mind mapping. Right? So the concept of mind mapping helps in case you have to attempt a logical structure question. So you have to know what the main idea of the passage is, and then you have to know what the functions of each paragraph are. Right? That is what we have discussed in mind mapping, right? Knowing what each particular paragraph is about. So if you have the mind map clear in your mind, then answering this question becomes easy. The answer is option 1. It discusses the impact of the ideas discussed in the previous paragraphs. Which are the ideas? The 3 concepts of post-humanism that were discussed. Right? So the impact of the ideas discussed in the previous paragraphs as they applied to a particular discipline. Right? Which discipline? The discipline of humanism. Right? It discusses the impact. How do I know it discusses the impact? Because if you look at the language of the last paragraph, see, first of all, it's talking about those 3 concepts that were discussed in the earlier paragraph, right? It talks about those 3 concepts. And this is one, this is the second, and this is the third. And if you see what it's doing while discussing those 3 concepts is, it is talking about what will happen. So for example, for the first one, it says would presumably jettison or talk of moral appear pessimistic. So that is what would happen. Environmentalist geography of a post-humanist sort will have to rationalize talking will happen. Right? Anti-essentialists are already at work in geography, but have ahead of them the so it's going to happen. So it's talking about what will happen. So it's talking about the impact that these 3 ideas will have when we talk of the particular discipline of humanism. Right? Let's have a look at the other options. Option 2 says it expands on the ideas espoused in the previous paragraphs. I don't mind this part. Right? This part is correct. But when it says by giving examples of their real world application, this is not there. Right? So option 2, first part is okay. It expands on the ideas espoused in the previous paragraphs. Right? If I consider espoused to be discussed, right, figuratively, right, I don't mind the first part. But the second part, real world applications, not discussed. Option 3 says previous illustrating their application to a particular subject. Here, the issue is with the term justifies. It is not justifying the arguments. Okay, I'm sorry. I think my voice was breaking. Right, my voice was breaking. I'll just turn off my video for some time. Right, my voice was breaking. Option 3, the issue is that it does not justify the arguments that were mentioned in the previous paragraph. Right, so this part where it says justifies the arguments, that is not what's happening in option 3. Right, which is why even option 3 is not correct. I don't mind the second part of option 3, where it says in the previous paragraphs by illustrating their application to a particular subject. This is almost the same as option 1. Right, this is almost the same. The only difference between 1 and 3 is 3 says it justifies the arguments. That's not what it's doing. 4 says it summarizes the arguments presented in the previous paragraphs and identifies further studies that are needed. See, again, there are two parts over here. One is it says it summarizes the arguments. This itself is debatable, right? Whether what's given in the last paragraph is a summary or not. But more importantly, if you look at the last part, it talks about identifying further studies. This is not happening. So option 4 but again, between options 1 and 3, it was kind of difficult. Option 1 is the answer. This again, I would not categorize as an easy question, right? Not an easy question. Question 4, each one of the following matches an idea and one of its beliefs accurately except, right? So it's an except question. Which of the following pairs is not correct, right? As per the passage, right? As per the information given in the passage, which one of the following pairs is not accurate, right? That is what the question is. Option 2 is the answer, right? Option 2 is the answer. Why option 2 is the answer is because the passage talks about deep ecology and radical environmentalism. So when you say environmentalism mentioned, it's talking about radical environmentalism. Whereas here, it only talks about environmentalist geography. Please note, this is something we have discussed time and again, that specific to general does not necessarily have to be correct. Right? We had discussed this even when we were discussing certain questions in the last mock. Specific to general does not necessarily have to be correct. I'm not saying it's necessarily wrong. That's not what I'm saying. But it does not have to be correct. Right? So what was discussed was radical environmentalism. Right? But what's discussed here is environmentalist geography. I don't mind the second part of it. Right? I don't mind the second part of it. But the first part is where it's going wrong. Right? It should have been radical environmentalist geography. The other three that have been given, right? The other three those are correct, right? The other three that have been given, those make sense, right? But option 2 is wrong because it's going from specific information in the passage to general information that's given over here. This again, maybe I would call an easy question, right? If you were able to identify that they have generalized it over here, right? Then I would call it an easy question, but some of you might have found it difficult because of the third answer option. Right? That is possible, right? Because of the third answer option, because the third answer option is not given directly, but it's implied indirectly, right? But otherwise, I would say that this is an easy question. On the whole, if I look at the 4 questions of this passage, right, there was just one outright easy question, which was the second question. Fourth question, for some people, it could have been easy if you were able to identify specific to general. But on the whole, kind of difficult in the passage. Right? The passage itself was not very easy to understand, and the questions were kind of difficult, right? In general. Okay, try the next passage. Just read through it quickly. We'll then discuss the questions. Take a few moments more, then we come to the questions. Okay, let's discuss. Question 1 says each of the following can be inferred from the passage except, right? So which one of the following cannot be inferred from the passage? Option 1 says the pheromones secreted by ants can likely give directions about a location. This is correct, right? So this cannot be the answer because this is an inference as per the passage. The second one says it's implausible, right? Implausible is basically something that's difficult to believe or something that is irrational. Right? It's implausible that the Matabele ants can successfully raid termite mounds. This is also correct. Right? This is also correct. Why? Because here it clearly says that the ants bypass the well-defended termite mounds. Right? So they bypass them. So if they bypass them, so chances are that they cannot successfully raid those mounds. Right? So it's implausible. That is, it's difficult to believe that they can successfully raid those mounds because had they been successful or could they be successful, then they would have done it. They would not have bypassed it. Right? So option 2 is also an inference. Option 3 says the casualty. Right? The casualty suffered by the larger ants is likely lesser than by smaller ants. This is also a valid inference. Right? This is also a valid inference because here clearly it says that it is the smaller ants. Right? It is the smaller ants that lose a leg. Right? At some point, about a third of the smaller ants that participate in termite hunts lose a leg at some point. Right? So chances are that the larger ants, they suffer fewer casualties or lesser casualties as compared to the smaller ants. The fourth one is the answer, right? It is the one that cannot be inferred. Why? Because it says in the foraging, right? Basically the search for food, right? In the search for food, the termites have likely created a strong protective layer, right? This is from the perspective of termites. It says have likely created a strong protective layer, right? Had they created a strong protective layer, they would not have been attacked easily by the ants, right? So option 4 is inference, right? It is not an inference because here it clearly says that they send scouts to spot termites feeding on the ground. And when a scout returns with a termite sighting, so the scouts are easily able to go and spot the termite. So if they're able to spot the termite, then I cannot say that the termites have created a strong protective layer. Right? So option 4 cannot be inferred. Easy question. Right? Easy question. If nothing else, by elimination. Right? If nothing else, by elimination, but this was an easy question. Question 4, the behavior of the ants in nursing the injured ants can best be described as. See, cognitive definitely cannot be the answer because that is contradicted somewhere towards the end. It says without any need of cognition, right? So there's no need of cognition. So cognitive cannot be the answer, right? And somewhere it says that it is programmed into them. Here it says it is an unprecedented glimpse of nursing in nature. It is a programmed behavior. So we have to look for an answer option that is consistent with a kind of behavior that is programmed into them, right? Which is why even acquired cannot be the answer because acquired is something that we learn through experience, right? An acquired habit is maybe one that you pick up through experience. It is not programmed into you right from the beginning, right? The connotation of the term program means that it is inherent. Now, options 1 and 3 are very, very close answer options, right? Options 1 and 3 are very, very close answer options. To a certain extent, both these answer options are right. It's just a matter of determining which word is more appropriate, right? From the perspective of being more appropriate, option 1 is a better option. right? Because innate refers to something that is inborn or something that is natural. Whereas it means something similar, right? Inherited, even though it means something similar, could also have the implication of something that has been obtained from someone's parents or grandparents, that is one generation above or two generations above, right? I repeat, it's not wrong. In this context, inherited is not necessarily wrong, but option one, innate, is a better option, because inherited generally has the implication of having come from a particular generation, right? So maybe from the generation above me or maybe two generations above me. But the term used in the passage is programmed, which means that it has always been there, right? When I say it has been programmed into them, it means that it has always been there, so it's inborn and it comes naturally. That is why option one is a better option. Option three is not wrong. It's not completely wrong, but option one is a better option, right? Option one is a better option. I guess quite a few of you had marked option three as the answer, right? That's very close, but option one is definitely a better option. Here, the only thing was that you should have been clear about what the term innate means, right? Because if you were not clear about the term innate, then option three seems a better option. On the whole, I would not say that this is an easy question, right? This was not an easy question from my perspective because of options one and three being very similar, right? But options two and four should have been eliminated, right? Options two and four are contrary to what the passage says, right? So two and four could not have been the answers. But on the whole, I won't categorize this as an easy question. Question 7, you can stand up, you are still useful. Which one of the following logical inferences can be made from the above statement, right? Which one of the following logical inferences can be reasonably made from the above statement, right? The statement is, if you can stand up, you are still useful, right? If you can stand up, you are still useful. Here, this is where it is. If you can stand up, you are still useful. That means that if you cannot stand up, chances are that you are not useful. The answer over here is option three, right? That is from the context. The assignment of the degree of urgency by the helper ants. See, that is what the context is about in the passage. Right? The second last and the last paragraphs are talking about which of the wounded ants are going to get saved or nursed. Right? So there is a kind of priority that is assigned. Is based on which ants can be healed for a future raid. Can be healed for a future raid. This is where the term useful makes sense. Right? So if you can stand up, you are still useful. Useful for what? Right? When is the ant going to prove useful? It's going to prove useful in case of a future raid. Right? So option three is what the author wants to say. Right? It is what we understand as per what the author wants to say. Let's look at the other options. Option one says the helper ants prioritize which injured ants to be attended to be based on those injured ants requiring immediate help. Requiring immediate help. This is not more wounded ones which are almost going to die. Those are the ones that require immediate help, but those are not the ones that get help. Right? That is kind of implied over here. Right? The ones that are about to die, heavily injured ants cannot get up again. Right? They do not get aid. Right? So option one is wrong. Option two says the success rate of nursing an injured ant after if the injured ant is able to show violent restlessness. Right? This is ridiculous. And this is not what the passage says anywhere. Right? The success rate of nurturing an injured ant is dependent on showing violent restlessness. And option four says the helper ants showcase cognitive behavior. In the previous question, we have just discussed that cognition is not coming into play. Right? So option three is the answer. This is again an easy question. Was the passage difficult to understand, nor were the answer options really close. Right? Sometimes the passage is really difficult to understand. So even without the answer options being closed, the question can get difficult. Right? So when I say easy, it's from the perspective of the passage as well as the question. Right? This question should have been answered correctly. Question 8 says, based on the information set out, which of the following is most likely to be? Which one of the following is The answer is 4. If the branch have one or two missing, basically what this is implying is, I'm just turning off my video for some time. Right? What this implies is if the injured ants are not seriously wounded, they will be picked up and carried home. But if their injuries are much worse, they will be left behind. This is exactly what paragraph. It's the injured ant cannot get up again. If they cannot in prevents, they cannot release pheromones. If they cannot release pheromones, right, the ants that will come to rescue will not be able to locate them. Right. So in which case they will be left behind. Right. This is what the passage is implying. Option 1, let's look at the other options. Option 1 says if the injured ants have only one or two legs missing, they will be left behind. Right. This is exactly the opposite. Because it says, but if the injuries are much worse, they will be picked up and carried home. Right. This is exactly the opposite. Option 2 says if the injured ants have most of the legs missing, they will be picked up and carried home. But if the ant is dead, they will be left behind. Right? Not correct. Because if they have most of the legs missing, they will not be able to release pheromones. They will not be located. They will not be picked up. They will not be carried home. Right? So option 2 is wrong. Option 3 says if the injured ants have most of the legs missing, they will be cared for at the raid scene. Right? This is not discussed anywhere. That they will be cared for at the raid scene if they have most of the legs missing. Option 4, again, an easy question from the last paragraph. Right? Again, an easy question from the last paragraph, and the last paragraph was not difficult to understand. It was clear cut. This passage had 3 easy questions. So apart from the passage itself being very easy to understand, there were 3 very simple questions in this passage. Right? Those of you who attempted this passage should have gotten at least 3 questions correct. The only confusing question could have been question 6. Right? If you were not sure of the difference between innate and inherited. Right? But the other 3 questions were very simple questions. It does not get simpler than this. Right? It does not get simpler than this. Okay, go through this. We'll then discuss the questions. Right? Take a few minutes. Go through this. We'll then discuss the questions. Take a minute more, then we'll discuss. This passage is slightly difficult to understand. Let's take a minute more, then we'll discuss. Okay, let's discuss. Question 9. Chomsky is fighting a straw man. What does the author suggest by this statement? To answer this question, you at least have to be clear what a straw man is. Right? Even if you're not clear from prior knowledge, right? That is even from a vocabulary perspective, if you're not clear, if you have been able to understand that paragraph well, right? Those two paragraphs from which this question comes, and you'll be able to arrive at what a straw man refers to. Right? Straw man is basically a weak position that is that or that can be easily refuted or proven wrong. And that is what straw man refers to. Right? It's a weak position generally put across in opposition to something, but it's a weak position such that it is very easily to prove. It is very easy to prove it wrong. Right? It's very easy to prove it wrong. That is what straw man means. So here it says Chomsky is fighting a straw man. That means that Chomsky is going against something that is very weak. Right? Chomsky is going against something that is very weak. The answer is option 1. Chomsky has unnecessarily made an argument. Why are we saying unnecessarily made an argument? Because what he is arguing against, that anyways is very weak. So he should not have made an argument. Because what he has made an argument against can anyways be proven wrong. That is why unnecessarily made an argument is correct, for which there is actually no disagreement. Right? So if there is no disagreement, it means that it can easily be proven wrong. Right? It can easily be proven wrong, for which there is actually no disagreement. Right? And this aspect for which there is actually no disagreement, to a certain extent, you get it from the passage also. However, nobody disputes this. So in the passage, Chomsky is fighting a straw man. So even if you look at the context, the sentence in which that phrase or clause is used, and it clearly says that nobody is disputing it. So if nobody is disputing it, it means that there is no disagreement. And it clearly has said so. And it clearly has said so he is fighting a straw man. So the answer has to be option 1. Right? Let's look at the other options. Option 2 says Chomsky has made an exaggerated claim which can be easily falsified with simple logic. Right? Now just notice what's happening in option 2. Option 2 is saying that Chomsky has made an exaggerated claim and Chomsky's claim can be easily falsified. So as per option 2, Chomsky is the person who has put across the straw man. I hope all of you understand this. As per option 2, it is Chomsky who has made a claim which can be easily falsified. So as per option 2, it is Chomsky who has put across the straw man. Whereas Chomsky has not put across the straw man. Chomsky is fighting a straw man. So the straw man is on the other side. So option 2 is completely wrong. Option 3 says Chomsky has made a valid claim by addressing an issue that some linguists disagree with. Right? Some linguists disagree with. This is wrong. Right? Because here it clearly says nobody disputes this. And just look at the word nobody. Nobody is in italics. Right? So that term is emphasized that nobody disputes this. So there is no question of some linguists disagreeing with it. Option 4 says Chomsky has made a very weak assertion and that not a single person considers being truthful. Same problem as with option 2. He has put across the straw man. He's not the one who's made the straw man. He's the one who's fighting the straw man. On the whole, right? On the whole, this was not a difficult question, even if you did not know what straw man meant. Why I'm saying this is not a difficult question is because this is something that is directly given. Nobody disputes this. So, right, the word so is used here. So Chomsky is fighting a straw man. Right? There is actually no disagreement. Right? It had to be option 1. Right? It had to be option 1. Question 10. Which one of the following best sums up Tomasello's main argument? Right? Tomasello's main argument. Which one of the following best sums it up? Where is Tomasello's argument given? It is given in the 3rd paragraph. Right? Where it says, as Tomasello put it, saying that humans have language is like saying that humans build skyscrapers, whereas the fact is that only humans build freestanding shelters at all. So basically what Tomasello is saying is that in this sentence, what he's saying is that it is wrong to say that humans are unique in only one aspect, because humans are unique in a lot of aspects. And then it says Tomasello argues, right? So here his specific argument is coming in. Language is a consequence of the basic human ability to recognize others' communicative intentions. So language is arising from the basic human ability to recognize others' communicative intentions. Which is why in question 10, the answer is option 3. Language is related to the ability of humans to cooperate. Right? Language is related. Why related? Because it's a consequence of human ability to recognize others' communicative intentions. How do you communicate? Because you cooperate with someone. Only then is communication possible. Right? So that is where option 3 is correct from. Option 4 says universal grammar reflects how we acquire language. This is not Tomasello's main argument. Right? In fact, even the author does not kind of agree with this. Right? So option 1 is out. Right? Even the author does not kind of agree with this. Option 2 says humans are the only species which can acquire language. Please note, this is exactly the opposite intent of what Tomasello wants to say. Tomasello clearly wants to say that do not say that we are unique only because of language. He's trying to say that we are unique because of a lot of other reasons. So Tomasello will not agree with option 2. Right? I repeat, Tomasello will not agree with option 2. Because Tomasello says there are a lot of other things because of which we are unique. Language is not the only thing because of which we are unique. And option 4 says human beings have a self-contained language instinct. Right? Self-contained language instinct, this again will kind of go against. Because as per Tomasello, language is coming from something else. It's coming from the human ability to recognize others' communicative intentions. Right? So option 4 again, Tomasello will not agree with. Right? Will not agree with. Not an easy question. Right? Not an easy question, but some of you could have gotten the answer if you know exactly which sentence to look at. Right? Here it says Tomasello's main argument, and here it clearly says Tomasello argues. So those of you who were able to identify which statement to look at, right, would have gotten the answer. But if you did not know which statement to look at, then it kind of would have gotten difficult. Right? So I won't call it an easy question. Question 11. The author mentions subjacency effect to highlight which one of the following. Now, this is a difficult question, in my opinion. And this is a difficult question, in my opinion. To highlight which one of the following. Option 1 says subjacency effects are an integral part of understanding grammar. Right? That is, subjacency effects are an essential part of understanding grammar. And understanding grammar is something that is directly related to language, right? Use of language. So if you have a look at the passage, look at the last paragraph, that is where subjacency is. So no, you have to consider only the last paragraph. It clearly says that innateness of a language does not constitute arguments for innateness of UG, right? UG is universal grammar. So universal grammar and language in general are not related, which is why option 1 cannot be the answer. Option 1 contradicts that statement. The answer is option 2. It is unclear whether knowledge of subjacency is intrinsic to us. This is the answer, and it can clearly be obtained from the last sentence. The fact that we are the only species that has language does not entail that we have an innate knowledge of subjacency. Right? So it does not indicate or it does not prove that we have an innate knowledge of subjacency. Right? That is clearly what this is. It is unclear whether knowledge of subjacency is intrinsic to us. Right? So I'm getting this from the very last sentence of the passage. Option 3 says universal grammar entails an inherent understanding of subjacency. Now, this is an interesting option, right? This is an interesting option because here what it is doing is it is saying that universal grammar includes an inherent understanding of subjacency, right? So these two are very closely related, right? This is an interesting option, option 3. But if you look at the first sentence of the last paragraph, see, there are two parts in the first sentence. This is the first part. Then there is a dash that has been put, and then this is the second part. The first part, because the punctuation mark that has been used, right? Human ability to read and share intentions. This is the same as existence of other differences between humans and other species. As per the previous paragraph, explain right? May explain subjacency does not entail a lack of UG. So subjacency here is related to a lack of UG. Right? Subjacency is getting associated with a lack of UG, which is why option 3 is not correct. It kind of gets contradicted. And option 4 says subjacency effects differ based on the underlying circumstances. This is out of context. Right? This is out of context. But in my opinion, this is one of the more difficult questions in reading comprehension that we are discussing today. Right? One of the more difficult questions. Those of you who got this question correct, right? I would say that's good. Right? That's really good. Those of you who got this question correct. Question 12, each of the following is an aspect of our communicative intentions except. Right? The aspect of our communicative intentions. The other is option 1. It's an inherent ability. Right? I'll tell you why I'm going with option 1 because it can be argued. Right? It can be argued that communicative intentions is an inherent ability. But if you have a look at what the passage specifically says, right? If you have a look at what the passage basically specifically says, look at the third last paragraph, last sentence. It says it is a consequence of the basic human ability to recognize others' communicative intentions. So what is unique to humans is recognizing others' communicative intentions, right? Please note this is very specific with reference to communicative intentions. We are not saying that communicative intentions are unique to humans. It is recognizing those communicative intentions that is unique. So this again is an example of will not be, it does not have to be correct. Option 2 says it acts as a crucial tool that enables learning a language. This is correct. Right? This is correct that it is a crucial tool that enables learning a language. Right? Where am I getting this from? I'm getting this from the second last paragraph. And if you notice, the second last paragraph is talking only about communicative intentions in general. Right? So option 2 is there in the second last paragraph. So option 2 cannot be the answer. Option 3, it helps understand the purpose of the language. This is again there in the second last paragraph. Right? Second last paragraph, communicative intentions, and then it clearly says enables the language learner to understand what language is for. Right? So it helps in understanding the purpose. It is a part of our ability to read and share intentions. Right? This is again a valid inference that it's a part of our ability to read and share intentions. Right? This is where reading and sharing intentions is given. This is also where it is given. And it's in the same context where it says including communicative intentions. But I would not the question because option 1 would have seemed correct. But if you again went by elimination of answer options, then it was not too difficult. Right? If you went by elimination of answer options. On the whole, the questions again were difficult. Right? The questions are first question of the passage, question 9. The other questions were difficult questions. Those of you who attempted this passage in approximately 10 minutes, whether this passage was to attempt, we'll discuss that later. But those of you who did attempt this and you spent around 10 minutes, and you got 2 or more questions correct, right? That is good. Right? In 10 minutes, reading and answering the questions, if you got 2 or more questions correct in this passage, I would say that is good at this stage of time. Right? At this point of time, when you still have around 5 odd months left, that is good, right? Considering the difficulty level. Okay. Try the fourth passage. Let's just read through it once, then we'll do the questions. Take a minute more, then we'll discuss. Okay, let's discuss this. What would these two most likely disagree about? Right? What would these two most likely disagree about? If you have understood the passage, this is an easy question where the answer is option 3. Whether a market-based solution has at least some advantage for the general good or not. That is what these two would disagree about. Where am I getting this from? I'm getting this from the last paragraph, right? A similar viewpoint analyzes Ernest Partridge's liberal critique of the dogmatic free position. Right? Talks about a similar viewpoint. Similar to whom? Similar to the earlier person, right? Right? Similar to the earlier person. But then it says, however, so this is where the change in opinion is coming in. However, Partridge shows more sympathy for market-based solutions. More sympathy than whom? More sympathy than the earlier person, D. Shalit. Right? So Partridge shows more sympathy for market-based solutions. That is where I'm getting option 3 from. This was a very simple question. Right? It was a very simple question. Option 1 says whether a policy decision in any area should be based on empirical evidence. Empirical evidence is mentioned with respect to Partridge. But please note that before empirical evidence is mentioned, this is where empirical evidence is mentioned. But please note the word but has been used, which means that the viewpoint has again changed. So the first part was similar. Then when it talked about more sympathy, that was with respect to however. So this is where it changed. But then there is again a change happening because of the word but. So empirical evidence is likely to agree with D. Shalit. Right? That is why option 1 cannot be the answer. Because option 1 is something that these two are likely to agree on. Please make a note here. I think I've discussed this earlier as well. Notice contrast indicators carefully. Right? Notice contrast indicators carefully, because quite a few questions can be made on sentences that have contrast indicators, which are likely to be missed by those reading it. Right? So please notice contrast indicators carefully. Right? It is because of the contrast indicator, but that option 1 is not the answer. And it is because of the contrast indicator, however, that option 3 is the answer. Right? Option 2 says whether a rigid market economy is a proper solution to environmental problems. Free market economy, both of them have certain reservations or certain option 4, whether a value neutral version. Please note this concept of value neutral version is mentioned only with reference to the earlier person, D. Shalit, right? In the second last paragraph, where it talks about a value neutrality of versions. We don't have information given it about it from the perspective of Partridge, right? Chances are that he might agree with that also. So option 3 is a very clear-cut answer here. Question 14, each of the following is a view espoused by D. Shalit except that. Right? Again, an except question. The question is, which of the following would D. Shalit not agree with? Right? Not agree with D. Shalit. Right? The answer here is option 4. Liberal environmentalism is based on an ideology grounded in ethics and politics. Please note why option 4 is something that he will not agree with. Yes, he talks about liberal environmentalism. Right? Liberal environmentalism is there. Right? So this is there. Ideology, ethics, and politics. Right? Even that to a certain extent is given. Thus, the determination of value must be an ethical and political question. So there toward the moral and political reasoning, this is there. The problem with option 4 is it says that it is based on. Right? The problem with option 4 is that I cannot say that liberal environmentalism is based on an ideology grounded in ethics and politics. Liberal environmentalism and ethics politics are individually true, but whether the first one is based on the second one, that we do not know. Whereas the other options are definitely things that he would accept. A tax on a market transaction that creates a negative externality is counterproductive, right? This is there, right? This is there. This is also it's about other species, all sentient creatures, entire ecosystems, etc. Right? That's also given. Citizens concerned with public goods should have a role in environmental issues. This is also there. Right? Having a role in environmental issues. This is where it is. Must be decided by citizens concerned with the public good, environmental questions. Right? So those three options are there. Right? Those three options are there. Again, an easy question. Right? Again, an easy question. Right? The first three options could easily be eliminated. The fourth option is not what D. Shalit has advocated. Question 15, which one of the following best reflects the idea of tragedy of the commons? Whenever you have a question that is based on a term or a sentence that's used in the passage, the first thing that you do is you locate where it is. So where is tragedy of the commons given? In the last sentence. He contends that in many cases, free market policies will result in versions of the tragedy of the commons. Now, it could have been possible that they mentioned the term tragedy of commons without giving an explanation. That could have happened. But in this passage, they have told you what they imply by tragedy of the commons. So I will not use my prior knowledge of what the author has mentioned what he wants to say. So the author wants to say is that in which each person pursues their own good, but the good of all will suffer. Right? Each person will pursue their own good. Right? So everybody is going to pursue their own good. I am going strictly as per what the author has written. I'm not using my prior knowledge, maybe of economics. I'm not using that. I'm going only as per what the author has written because that is what reading comprehension is about. Right? So from that perspective, right? From that perspective, the answer is option 2. A situation where self-interest, right? Why self-interest? Because it clearly says each person pursues their own good, prevails over the common good. And that is exactly what it says. Again, cannot get easier than this. Option 1. Now just look at why the other options are wrong. Self-centered action by the privileged affects the ordinary people, right? But if you notice, the passage talked about each individual. I am not to use prior knowledge, right? I am not to use prior knowledge. I have to go only as per what's written. As per written, each individual is pursuing his own good, right? So I cannot differentiate amongst the people because everybody is doing it. Option 3, same problem. Free market economy where the majority suffer to a minority. Same problem as with option 1. It's not about one group of people and the other group of people because everybody is doing it. Option 4, a policy which negatively impacts a significant number of people. Same problem. Right? It negatively impacts the entire group because it is applicable to the entire group, each and every person. Right? Again, an easy question. The answer is option 2. Right? The answer is option 2. Question 16, which one of the following best describes the author's view on liberal environmentalism? Again, this is a tone-based question which cannot get any simpler. It's objective neutrality. Right? The author has not agreed or disagreed. Right? I'm giving you the reason why option 1 is the answer. The author has not either agreed or disagreed with the philosophies mentioned. Right? The author has just stated certain things. He has not given his or her opinion. Right? He has not given his or her opinion. So the tone of the author is neutral. What does objective mean? Objective is when you consider both the sides. Right? Or when you try to right? So yes, it's objective. Right? Why am I calling it objective? Because he has taken not only D. Shalit's view, he has taken Partridge's view also. Right? He has taken Partridge's view also. So it's objective. Why neutral? Because he's neither positive nor negative. Endorsement is positive. Skepticism is negative. Support is positive. Right? So options 2, 3, 4 wrong. In this passage, all the questions were doable questions. Right? I've categorized all the questions as easy. All the questions were doable questions. Right? Those of you who could get all 4 questions correct, or even 3 out of 4 questions correct, having spent 10 minutes reading the passage and answering the questions, that is good. But if you spent 10 minutes reading and understanding the passage and answering the questions and got less than 3 questions correct, right? That is something that can be improved upon. Right? That is something that can be improved upon. So with this, we are done with the RC questions in this paper. Right? 4 RC passages, 4 questions each. We are done with the RC questions. Now let's come to the non-RC questions. Right? Now let's come to the non-RC questions. Take a minute, go through the sentences. We'll then discuss. This is, in my opinion, a difficult question. Right? Just go through it. Sentence arrangement, right? Parajumbles. Okay, let's discuss this. Right? Let's discuss this. Make a note here. In case the sentences have either contrast or non-contrast indicators. Right? In case the sentences have contrast or non-contrast indicators, identify the tone of the sentences. This is a technique that I have discussed in Parajam, right? When I was discussing conjunctions, contrast conjunctions and non-contrast conjunctions, where, if you recall, I had talked about the concept of grouping of tones, right? The concept of grouping of tones. Now, how do I know that this concept could come in helpful? Right? I'm saying could come in helpful. I cannot be 100% sure that it works for every question, but it should work for quite a few questions. Right? So how do I have to look for grouping of tones? Because if I have a look at certain terms that are used, right? If I have a look at certain terms that are used, those terms imply a contrast. For example, right? For example, in option 1, the term outliers, right? The term outliers. What does outlier mean? Those who are from the majority. Of contrast is conjunction. That's why I've used the term indicator, right? It just indicates a contrast. Right? So the term outliers over here in the first sentence. In the second sentence, the term unusual. In the second sentence, the term unusual. So in the first sentence, it was the term outliers. In the second sentence, it is the term unusual. Right? Third sentence, first word, although women are still underrepresented. Right? So I have quite a few terms. Right? I have quite a few terms that indicate a contrast. So what I will try to do is I'll try to group the tones together. Right? I'll try to group the tones together. Statement 4 has to be the opening statement. Right? Why does it have to be the opening statement? Because it is the most general statement. Right? We go from general to specific. Right? We go from general to specific. So statement 4 says prizes boost careers and create role models, but some of the most prestigious awards. Right? This is general. Right? This is not mentioning specific details. Right? That's why I'm calling it general. It's talking about prizes in general. It's talking about most prestigious awards in general, etc. So statement 4, that needs to be the first statement. And that is for sure. Now, based on tone, please note 2, 3 is a mandatory pair. Right? 2, 3 is a mandatory pair. Why? Because if you look at statement 2 towards the end, it says, although women make up 37% of the society's members, they made just 20% of the nominations. Right? So in spite of being 37% by population, they made just 20% nominations. So from a tone perspective, right, not from a content perspective, from a tone perspective, maybe this is something that the author considers negative. Right? Maybe this is something that the author considers negative. Then statement 3 mentions the word although women are still underrepresented in EGU nominations, right? Still underrepresented. This is exactly what the previous statement was talking about. Their share of awards is now approaching their representation among the EGU members, thanks to corrective measures. Words like thanks, corrective, etc. This is positive. So there's a negative sentence, the content of which is the same as option 3. Option 3 begins with a contrast conjunction and it's a positive sentence. So 2, 3 is a mandatory pair. Right? 2, 3 is a mandatory pair. 3, 1 is also a mandatory pair. Why? Because it says, sadly, the EGU is amongst the outliers. Right? In 3, they were talking about EGU from a positive perspective. But sadly, it is different from the majority. Right? Because it is the outlier. It's different from the majority. And then it says most scientific societies do not make nomination data public. Most scientific societies, these are the majority. They do not make nomination data public. This is maybe what the author considers negative. Right? So the sequence is 4, 2, 3, 1. Right? Sequence is 4, 2, 3, 1. On the whole, from the perspective of difficulty, I would call this a difficult question. Okay, Anshul, your doubt is that 2 and 1 can be with each other. See, the thing is, if I take 2 and 1 together, if I take 2 and 1 together, just note that statement 2, it says, although they make up 37% of the members, they made just 20% of the nominations. This is negative. Right? Statement 2, the ending of it is negative. Option 1 then says, it also talks about EGU, right? It says EGU is amongst the outliers. So it is different than the majority. Most societies do not make nomination data public. So it's saying that the majority is doing something that is undesirable. So if the majority is undesirable and EGU is an outlier, that means that with reference to EGU, the author is positive. Right? The author is positive with reference to EGU. So 1 is a positive sentence with reference to EGU. And when we talk about positive, negative, the content needs to be the same. The context needs to be the same. So 2 is negative, 1 is positive with reference to EGU. But there is no contrast conjunction between 2 and 1. That is why 2 and 1 cannot be grouped together. right? Because there is no contrast conjunction, because 1 is positive. So I can have 1 after 3 because 3 was positive and there was a contrast conjunction that changed the negative to positive. That's why 2 and 1 won't come together, because the tones won't match. Right? Tones won't match, because in option 1, indirectly, the author is appreciating EGU. In option 1, he's appreciating EGU. Whereas in option 2, the author is critical of EGU. Right? There's a disagreement in tone, because of which this word although is required. Right? That's why 2 and 1 won't come together. On the whole, this was a difficult question. Yeah, tell me actually.
Actually, sir, was the issue was that in the second one we are talking about the the data about that
Ani, sorry,
particular.
can you say that again? Can you say that
In,
again?
in the second sentence,
Uh-huh.
in the second option, we are talking about the data that it is 37% of the society members and there are only 20% of the nomination. And in the first one,
Correct.
we are talking about that EGU is the only one that is making the data public. So I think the two and one should be come together because they are interrelated in that manner.
See, option 1 says that EGU is amongst the outlier. Most societies do not make nomination data public. So what you are saying is okay, that maybe EGU is making the nomination data public. Right? I agree with that. That maybe option 1 implies that EGU is making the nomination data public. Option 2, it says EGU did something unusual. Although women make up 37% of society's members, they made just 20% of nominations. For all I know, what is given over here in this bracketed portion, 37%, 20%, this might not be the only thing that is involved in making nomination data public, which is why content-wise, I cannot equate those two. Because for all I know, there could be something else that is involved. Right? There could be something else that is involved. But here, the more contrasting thing is that there's a change in the tone, right? Which is something that becomes difficult to ignore, the change in the tone. And this is something that will always assume importance whenever we have contrast conjunctions given, because the contrast conjunctions need to be justified, which is not happening here, right? Which is not happening here. Any other doubts? That is, are you
So,
convinced?
yeah, okay.
The only thing is that making nomination data public and the information that's given in option 2, statement 2, right? Those may or may not be exactly the same thing. That's the only issue that I have over here, right? Whereas option 3, statement 3, where it talks about still underrepresented, right? This still underrepresented is a direct reference to 37% and 20%. Right? That's a direct reference. So that is where I have consistency in content. That's why I grouped 2 and 3 together. Okay, so question 17 on the whole, I would say that it was a difficult question, right? It was a difficult question. Question 18, from the perspective of parajumbles, right, where you have to arrive at the entire sequence when you have 4 statements given, it will never get easier than this, right? It will never get easier than this. The sequence is 2, 4, 3, 1, right? The sequence is 2, 4, 3, 1. It used to be thought that science and technology would gain us the world, and these two would gain us the world. 4 says it now looks as though they are allowing us to destroy it, right? It now looks. There is a direct relation between 2 and 4. One is this, they refers to science and technology. This it refers to the world. That is one connection between 2 and 4. The other connection, and please understand this, appreciate this, because this is something that you might come across in quite a few questions, is there is a relation based on chronology. Statement 2 says it used to be thought. Used to be thought means it happened in the past. Then it says it now looks, right? So the past is different than the present, and these are two different thought processes, right? So 2, 4 necessarily is a mandatory pair. So 4 comes after 2. It looks as if science and technology are allowing us to destroy the world. Why is it happening? The fault lies not with scientific knowledge itself, which is amongst finest achievements, but with our greed and short-sightedness in exploiting that knowledge. Right? So what statement 3 is doing is it's explaining statement 4. Right? That is, how are they helping us destroy it? By our greed and short-sightedness. And then it says, statement 1 says there's a real danger we might end up. Right? So this is what is going to come in the end. It's talking about how we might end up. So it has to come as the last statement. With the worst of all possible scenarios, we have lost the world and lost our souls as well. Right? So 2 and 4 together, 4 and 3 together, and 1 has to be the last sentence. This question was doable. Right? This question was something that was one that should have been gotten correct. Right? This was a very simple question. Without answer options, 4 statements, it does not get simpler than this, in my opinion. Right? This was a very simple question. Even those of you who got it wrong, at max, it should have been about the placement of one sentence, but otherwise the other sentences are easy to put in sequence. Right? So the only way in which this should have been gotten wrong is with statement 1, with reference to statement 1. Right? 2, 4, and 3, there's absolutely no doubt about it. Right? So this is an easy question. Question 19, summary question. Just read through it once quickly. Again, an easy question. Right? Just read through it once quickly. The answer here is option 2. The aphorism, an apple a day keeps the doctor away, suggests that apple eating may reduce healthcare use. However, that may not be necessarily true. Why? Because it clearly says that this raises the question. Right? So there's a question that is raised. The point has not been settled, because of which option 4 cannot be correct, because it says cannot be true. The point has not yet been settled. Why? Because it again says has never been rigorously examined. So option 4 is definitely not the answer. Option 1 is wrong because it talks about fruits in general. This passage with reference to fruits, it was only talking about an apple. It is not with reference to fruits in general, because here it says fruits such as apples. That means it applies to other fruits also. We cannot go from specific to general. Option 3 says the aphorism apple a day keeps the doctor away is likely inaccurate since it has not been rigorously examined by healthcare policymakers. This is wrong. This is an ideal case of distortion of content. Right? This is a clear case of distortion of content. Yes, it has not been rigorously examined. That's there in the last sentence. But who has not rigorously examined it? That is not mentioned. Right? Here option 3 says that health policymakers have not examined it. Again, from the perspective of a summary question, this was an easy question. In the last mock, the summary questions that we discussed were difficult questions, right? In this mock, this particular question is an easy question, right? It's a very simple summary question. The paragraph was not difficult to understand. It was not an abstract or a dense passage, right? The answer options were nowhere even close, right? There was a clear difference in the answer options. Okay, second last line. See, here it says, however, this raises the question of whether an apple a day actually keeps the doctor away. That is again, we have a dash over here. So it's an explanation. is apple consumption associated with reduced healthcare, right? So that's a question. So we don't know whether apple consumption is associated with reduced healthcare or not. We don't know that. It says prior studies showing improved health related to apple eating may not necessarily translate into lower healthcare use. Here in this sentence, they have differentiated between improved health and lower healthcare use. So they are saying that even though someone might have better health, he still might have to go to a doctor for some reason or the other. So in this second last sentence, they have differentiated by saying that having better health does not necessarily mean that you will go to the doctor less, right? A goal sought by policymakers. So policymakers, the goal is that they should visit the doctors less. For policymakers, the goal is not that they should keep better health. The goal is that they should visit the doctor less, right? That is what the last sentence says. And again, it says in the last sentence to acknowledge the association between daily apple consumption and the use of healthcare. So essentially, in this entire paragraph, what is contentious is not better health. What is contentious is reduced healthcare use, right? It is coming in time and again, right? Doctor from earning his bread. That is again, if we consult the doctor earns his bread, right? That is what the passage is saying, right? Okay. Question 20. Question 20, Parajumbles question. I'm sorry, odd sentence question, right? Odd sentence question. Here, as I said, whenever you're doing odd sentence questions, there are two ways to go about it. Either you try to identify the sequence for 4 sentences, the one that does not fit into the sequence, you mark that as the odd sentence. And the other technique is where you look for inconsistency with the context, right? That is the other thing that you can look for. Inconsistency in the context. Here in this question, the answer can be obtained through either one of those. Because if you look at the context, right, let's have a look at all these sentences. Option 1 says only 2 animal groups are known to have perfected the ability. So this is about some ability, right? 2 says echolocation is the primary means through which most bats navigate and hunt, right? Primary means through which they navigate and hunt. This could be the ability, right? 3 says echolocation's main weakness. So please note, this is now a negative tone. The first 2 sentences were neutral with reference to echolocation, right? With reference to echolocation, they were neutral. But option 3 is negative with reference to echolocation. Option 4 says eyes scan, noses sniff, fingers press, but these sense organs are always picking up stimuli that already existed in the wider world, right? Please note, this sentence is not negative with reference to echolocation. This sentence is kind of negative with reference to the human senses, right? Please note that statements 5 and 4 are a mandatory pair because it says echolocation differs from human senses because it involves putting energy into the environment. So in echolocation, something has to be put into the environment, and that is different from human senses. Statement 4 elaborates on what the human senses can do. Which are the human senses? Eyes scanning, noses sniffing, fingers pressing, etc. Sense organs. So 5 and 4 necessarily is a mandatory pair where 4 explains what humans can do, right? So 4 is fair enough, kind of negative, but with reference to humans. But with reference to echolocation, it's not negative, right? And statement 5 is also not negative with reference to echolocation. So the only one where there is an inconsistency with the context is option 3, right? It's option 3. That's the only one where there is an inconsistency because option 3 is negative. In this passage, in the other sentences, the author is not criticizing echolocation. He is not pointing out the weaknesses or shortcomings of echolocation, right? So option 3 has to be the answer. 5-4 is a mandatory pair. To that extent, even 2-1 is a mandatory pair. Why? Because 2 says it's the primary means through which most bats navigate and hunt. Only 2 animal groups are known to have perfected the ability, right? There are only 2 animal groups, right? So 2 and 1 will come together because of the ability. Please note that in question, in this question, 4 and 1 cannot come together. right? 4 and 1 cannot come together. Please note this, because of statement 4 is talking about a shortcoming of humans, whereas option 1 is talking about perfecting an ability. So 4 is about humans, option 1 is not about humans. So 4 and 1 are not going to come together. 5-4 mandatory pair, 2-1 mandatory pair. So even from the perspective of sequence, option 3 is the odd one out. Again, as a non-RC question, this is an easy question, right? Odd sentence question, it's an easy question. This one. So question 20 easy, question 19 easy, question 18 easy. So the non-RC questions till now have not been difficult, right? They have not been difficult till now. Again, sentence arrangement. Again, sentence arrangement. The correct sequence is 3, 2, 1, 4. Right? 3, 2, 1, 4. This, if anything, is even easier than the earlier question, right? Than the earlier sentence correction question. I'm sorry, sentence arrangement question, right? This is even easier than that, right? Easier than the earlier sentence correction question. 3 says in just one commercial or advertisement, celebrities can become closely associated with the products they endorse, right? And then 2 says so, right? So, right? This is something that is indicative of a logical continuation, right? So indicates a cause and effect pattern. So because they become closely associated, it's no surprise that when a celebrity's reputation is ruined, their reputation, that is the celebrity's reputation, is not the only thing that takes a hit, right? Not the only thing that takes a hit. So that means that there is something else that takes a hit. What is that other thing that takes a hit? It is what is given in 1. The companies can suffer by association. Now, there could be a doubt over here about whether it is 2-1 or 1-2, right? That is where there could be a doubt. That is after statement 3, is it 2-1 or is it 1-2? Please note that it has to be 2-1, because 2 is a general statement which is not specific about what else takes a hit. If you recall, I have discussed that general statements could also be vague statements. So statement 2 is vague about what takes a hit, whereas statement 1 is specifically telling us what also takes a hit. It is the company's reputation. That is why general first, specific later, it has to be 3-1. Statement 4 has to be the last statement. There is no question about it. Why? Because it's giving an example, right? It is the most specific statement. In the earlier 3 statements, we are talking about a phenomenon. We are talking about a process. Gives an example. So it is the most specific. So the only possible confusion could have been whether it's 3-2-1-4 or 3-1-2-4. Right? That is the only possible confusion, but 3-2-1-4 because of a clear case of general to specific. 2 out of 3 parajumble questions were simple questions, right? 2 out of 3, right? They were simple questions. Yes, 3-1-2-4 could have been something that some of you marked, right? 3-1-2-4. But it was essentially a matter of determining whether it's 2-1 or whether it's 1-2, right? We are using general to specific over there. Take a minute, go through this summary question. Take a minute, we'll then discuss it. Let's discuss this. Question 22, the best summary is the third option. In corporate situations, right? That is what the context was, right? Fair enough, it said most corporate situations, right? But why I don't have a problem with most corporate and corporate is because these most corporate situations are chaotic or vague. So this is where a particular approach is required, right? Because if the situation is chaotic or vague, then it's a problematic situation. So in a problematic situation, a particular approach is required, which is discussed, right? It's a structured approach that is required. The remaining corporate situations, which are not chaotic or vague, even if you use a structured approach, there's nothing wrong that's going to happen. Because if a structured approach can solve a problematic situation, it can definitely do no harm in an otherwise situation. Right? That's why I don't have an issue with most corporate situations and corporate situations. But in some other questions, this could have created a problem. Right? Please note that in some other questions, this could have created a problem. I hope all of you understood why it is not creating a problem in this question. Right? But please watch out for something like this. Right? General specific, please watch out for something like this. In corporate situations, a structured approach can aid your thinking process while arriving at an optimal situation for the situation at hand. Right? Structured approach, where am I getting this from? I'm getting this from here. Can aid your thinking process. Where am I getting aid from? Will help. Right? Help and aid are the same thing. While arriving at an optimal solution, where am I getting optimal solution from? Best solution from. At hand, that's there. Right? So I'm taking into consideration the first sentence, which says that there is a problem, and I'm taking into consideration the second part also, which is giving me the solution for it. The other options, option 1 is not wrong as such, but option 1 is incomplete. Right? Option 1 is incomplete. Right? Option 1 is incomplete. Option 1 says, while situations and organizations can be either chaotic or vague, the solution lies neither in taking advice from peers nor attending program. Right? It might be okay, but it does not tell me what the solution is. It gives me a problem. It does not tell me what the solution is. Whereas option 3 gives me the solution. Option 2 says chaotic and vague situations you encounter are best handled by a combination of training sessions and the self-created structured approach. Now, there are two issues over here. Please note the main issue over here. This is talking about chaotic and vague situations. This is talking about chaotic and vague situations in general. The passage was specific with reference to corporate situations that were chaotic or vague. So maybe a structured approach works when it's a chaotic or vague situation in a corporate. It does not work in real life. We don't know. So option 2, there is a genuine problem because it is kind of overgeneralizing the entire context. Are best handled by a combination of training sessions and a self-created structured approach. This is okay, but training session, right? This is where there's a problem. Because as per the third line, teachers in schools and trainers in corporate training sessions teach you what to think, not how to think. So as per line 3, there is a problem with the training sessions. So I cannot say that they are best handled by training sessions, right? Because as per the author, training sessions are also problematic. Option 4 says in an organizational setting, a structured problem approach is far better than creating solutions solely based on personal intuitions. This is out of context. Personal intuition is not discussed anywhere. Right? Personal intuition is not discussed anywhere. Yes, emotion is discussed, right? But that does not have to be the same as personal intuitions. Right? And emotions are not the only problem. It uses the word "to" over here. They are a part of the problem. Right? So option 3, clear answer. Again, as compared to the questions that I had in the earlier paper, summary questions, this is an easy question. Right? This is an easy question. There are clear-cut demarcations. But I just, all of you got the major takeaway from this question about why option 3 was acceptable in spite of saying in corporate situations. Right? Because in some other questions, I repeat, it could create a problem. Okay, on sentence question, just have a look at this. This is not as easy as the earlier one, but still doable maybe. Right? But I won't call it an easy question. Just take a minute, just go through it. In this question, please notice that 4-3 is a mandatory pair for sure. Right? 4-3 is a mandatory pair for sure. Why? Because it talks about the trade relation between Rome and the Far East. Right? Trade relation between Rome on one hand and Far East on the other hand. And it's talking about one of the legendary goods that were. And statement 3 talks about Romans. It's talking about identifying goods and it's talking about China. China, I'm relating to the Far East that has been mentioned in option 4, right? As per the information that's given, right? I'm relating it to that. So 4 and 3 are talking about the same context, right? They're discussing the exact same context. So 4 and 3 has to be a mandatory pair, right? Because we are talking about trade relations between two different parts of the world. That is what both 4 and 3. Please note 3-2 is also a mandatory pair for sure. Why? Why is 3-2 a mandatory pair? Because 2 says the same word. So when I say the same word, which same word? Which same word? That same word is here, the Latin word series. That is the same word. Please note that 2 because 5 is mentioning 2 words. Sericum is one word, Ceresa is the other word. So there are 2 words in 5. So if I say that 2 comes after 5, then it's problematic because I don't know which word it's talking about. So the reference to word is there only in 3. So 3-2 necessarily is a mandatory pair. So 4-3-2 for sure, right? Which means that 4-3-2 cannot be your answers, right? 4-3-2 cannot be the answer. So now it's just a choice between options 1 and 5. Option 5, we can consider to be a part of the sequence. Why consider a part of the sequence? Because if you have a look at statement 2 says the same word was used as an adjective to identify the silk garments or also from the land of series. So if you have a look at 2 is talking about the term from a vocab perspective, which is exactly what 5 is also doing. 5 is also talking about it from a vocab perspective. So 2 and 5, there's a link. Option 1 is the odd one out. Right? It's talking about mention of silk in the poems of Martial. Who is Martial? We don't know. Right? Who is Martial? We don't know. Right? And it talks about wealthy and sophisticated lifestyle. This has nothing to do with the other 4 sentences. The other 4 sentences have not indicated wealth or sophistication of any kind. Right? Medium difficulty level, right? Some of you might have found it easy, but I would say it's medium difficulty level, this question. Let's try the last question, summary question. This is a difficult question. And this was not an easy question. Just give it Okay, let's discuss the question. It's a summary question. You have to summarize the information that's given and the information that's written over here. Right? That is what has to be summarized. Right? So when I explain the four answer options, it's only from the perspective of what's written in the question paragraph. Right? It's from that perspective. The answer is option one. Right? The answer is option one. It is not unexpected that there is a theistic tradition of belief in an afterlife, since it allows an opportunity to address the problem of evil in one way. Right? It is not unexpected. Where am I getting this from? It is hardly surprising that there is a theistic tradition of belief in afterlife. Belief in afterlife should be an important part of the theistic tradition, right? So what is given in the first part of option one is there in the last part of the paragraph. Then it says, since it allows. So this is talking about a cause and effect pattern. How do I know it's a cause and effect pattern? Because it clearly says it is hardly surprising then. So this is the effect of something. It allows an opportunity to address the problem of evil in one way, right? That is what the earlier part of that sentence talks about. Option two, it says these can agree on the point that if evil exists. Please note that option two is generalizing the information given in the passage. As I said, whatever we do in case of a summary question is all from the perspective of what's written in the paragraph. Sorry. The paragraph talks about one instance of evil, right? It talks about one example of evil, which is where, if you see, here it also says such an evil. So we are talking about a specific instance in the paragraph, right? That is what the paragraph has mentioned. The author has mentioned that, right? So I cannot go with a generalized answer option, which talks about all evil. Option three says the existence of evil in the world associates the concept of the afterlife. Please note the concept of an afterlife is given only from the perspective of theists. It is not given from the perspective of atheists. So even option three is generalizing. Option four says the concept of the afterlife, a theistic tradition, is a natural outcome of deep-rooted evil in the world. Sorry. Of deep-rooted evil in the world. This is again generalizing the information. The paragraph, which is what we have to consider, right? Which is the only thing that we have to consider, is very specific. We cannot generalize. So that's where option four goes wrong as a summary of this particular question. Right? So as a summary of this particular question, the other options are wrong. 2, 3, 4. The best option is option one. Not an easy question, right? I would not say that this is an easy question. Okay, so we have discussed the questions, right? So from a theory, that is from a content perspective, we have discussed the questions. Now I'll just spend 5 minutes discussing it from a strategy perspective. In option one, what is given, right? In option one, what is given after since is referring to what is given in the last sentence before it. It is not 100% exactly the same, maybe, right? But it is related to what is given before it is hardly. Where it says allows us an opportunity to address the problem of evil in one way, right? It's related to that. It's not exactly the same. Which is why I said option one is the best option, because the other options have glaring issues as far as the paragraph is concerned. That is, if I compare them to the paragraph. Okay, now let's have a look at the strategy perspective, for which what I'll do is, again, let me have a look at the easy questions. One easy question here, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, 5. So let me write this down as non-RC questions, right? 5 easy questions. RC1, RC2, RC3, RC4. RC1 was the passage about humanism. RC2 was about ants and termites. Right? RC3 universal grammar, right? Language. And RC4 was the one about environmentalism. Right. So these were the 4 RC passages where, if I'm not wrong, RC4 had all 4 questions easy. Right? Yeah, RC4, all questions I called easy. And this is from my perspective, right? That is considering the stage of preparation that all of you are currently at. Right? The third passage, there was just one easy question. Right? The third passage, easy question, right? I'm only talking about the easy questions. One easy question. RC2, there were 3 easy questions, if I'm not wrong. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, 3 easy questions. And first passage, 2 easy questions. Right? So this is about the difficulty level of the paper, right, of this particular test. Now, again, as I mentioned in the last class, whatever strategy I discussed is considering the stage of preparation that all of you are currently in, right? We have had quite a few sessions for most of you, right? J1 to J6, and we still have around 5 odd months left for the exam, right? So the strategy that I discussed is now from that perspective, right? The current stage that we are at. As I said earlier, the strategy evolves as we proceed with our preparation and practice. As I discussed in the last class, because non-RC questions we haven't covered in our theory classes, right? With, I guess, almost all the batches, right? The non-RC questions, especially when I'm talking about para jumbles, para summary, and odd sentence questions, right? I would leave this for the end, and maybe I would spend 10 minutes over here, right? I would spend 10 minutes over here, and I would spend 30 minutes doing the RCs, right? Which is what I discussed last time also. So 30 minutes doing the RCs, I would allocate 10 minutes per passage because I would want to do 3 passages. Right? I would want to do 3 passages. So now the important question is, which 3 passages would I do? The second passage 100% should have been attempted. Right? Those of you who for any reason did not attempt the second passage, right? Maybe that would have led to a lesser score, right? A low score. The second passage should have been attempted because passage and questions both were easy, right? Both passage and questions were easy. Passage was more or less a factual passage. The questions were direct questions. In fact, quite a few questions came from the same part of the passage. So RC2 definitely should have been attempted. RC4 definitely should have been attempted. Why? Because from the perspective of a majority of us, right? A majority of us generally are comfortable with a topic like environmentalism, right? And even the content that was discussed, the content was not very abstract. More than that, the questions were very, very simple questions. So even if there was some kind of trouble understanding the passage in the beginning, the questions made up for it, right? The questions were not difficult questions. Now, whether it was RC1 that you attempted or RC3 as the third passage, that could have differed from person to person, right? That could have differed from person to person, right? Which passage you would have wanted to attempt between RC1 and RC3. I only hope that those of you who attempted the first passage did not attempt it only because it was the first one in sequence, right? I just hope that. Why I'm saying this is because there have been numerous instances where the first passage in sequence has been the most difficult one, right? Here, if you ask me, the most difficult RC was the third one, right? Passage plus questions combined, right? But my only point here is, do not attempt the first passage solely because it is the first one and you just want to give it a try whether it's easy or not. One very important component of your preparation, that is one of the primary purposes of giving a mock test, right? Especially with reference to VR, is to know what to attempt and what not to attempt. That is in case, right? That is what not to attempt. In case you are leaving out something, like for example, at this stage, if you're leaving out one passage, you have to know which passage not to attempt, right? So between RC1 and RC3, you could have made either choice. So now let's talk about the RCs, right? So we have discussed 3 RC passages, RC2, RC4 for sure, and 1 out of RC1 and RC3, right? Again, if your passage selection was wrong, you need to introspect about on what basis you did the passage selection, especially if you did not attempt RCs 2 and 4, right? So the basis on which you did the passage selection, that is to be respected in case you did not attempt RCs 2 and 4, right? Because passage selection goes a very, very long way. Those of you who started in sequence might not have reached the fourth passage, which had very easy questions, right? So this is something that has been seen. The earlier passages are difficult, the later passages are easy, right? Sometimes been seen. Okay, so let's say that you attempted these three. Across these three, there were 8 easy questions, right? If you attempted RC 2, 3, 4, right? 8 easy questions. If you were spending 10 minutes for each of these three passages, right? The least I can expect is that you get 6 questions correct, RC, right? These are the 6 easy questions out of the 8. Total of 12, out of which 8 questions are easy, out of which you should be getting at least 6 questions because the questions were very simple and you have spent at least 10 minutes per passage, right? So this is my at least scenario. My better scenario is 8 questions correct, right? This is my better scenario, 8 questions correct. When I say 8 questions, that does not necessarily have to be each and one of the easy questions. It could have been one of the moderate questions also. But better scenario is 8 questions correct. I'm not getting into the best scenario, right? Because there's no limit to the best scenario, right? So better scenario is 8 questions correct in RCs. So if I'm getting 6 questions correct, right? If I'm getting 6 questions correct, I'm getting 6 wrong. 6 threes are 18 minus 6, I'm getting 12 over here. And if I'm getting 8 questions correct, 8 threes are 24 minus 4, that is, I'm getting a score of 20 over here. Coming to the non-RC questions, having spent 10 minutes and even considering the fact that we haven't covered a lot of theory of non-RC in our regular classes, in a conservative scenario, 4 non-RC questions should have been got correct, giving you 12, right? I'm not considering negative marking, but some questions might not have negative marking, right? And in a better scenario, I say that in non-RC questions, you get 5 correct, right? Again, not necessarily 5 of the easier ones, maybe one of the more difficult ones also. So here I'm talking about a score of 15, right? So now if I summarize what I have discussed in a normal, what I mean by normal is what is at least the minimum that is expected. 12 plus 12, 24, right? Let me go on the conservative side. Let me put it across as a score of 22, right? 22, normal scenario. And what is my better scenario? It's 20 plus 15, 35. Let me put it across as 32, right? So the bare minimum that should have been got correct, right, is maybe 22, 32. Now, looking at the percentile distribution for this particular mock as on date, right? The analysis that is there as on date, a score of 22 would have been approximately an 82 percentile, right? And a score of 32 would have been around a 96 percentile. So let's do one thing. Let's tone this down further. Not even 82 percentile. I talk about a 78 to 80 percentile, bare minimum. And not a 96 percentile. I talk about a 93, 94 percentile. These are the two scenarios that I'm looking at today. 78 to 80 was easily achievable, right? 78 to 80. Because 78 to 80 required a score of just 20, right? A score of just 20, which should have been gotten, right? A better scenario would have been in the range of 93, 94 percentile, right? So those of you who could get in the range of 93, 94 percentile, I would say that that's good, right? That's really good at this stage. Yes, there's a lot of scope for improvement, right? But it's not bad at this stage. The only thing is, a mock test gives you an idea of where exactly it is that you currently stand. The good thing is that today, even if you haven't gotten a good score, you still have quite a bit of time to improve, right? So even if there are some of you who did not get a very good score, 40 percentile, 45 or a 50 or a 30 percentile, don't worry too much about it. The only thing is, the takeaway should be that you need to focus more, right? So when I call this a normal score, this is what ideally at least should have been got, right? But I'm not saying that those who scored less than this do not stand a chance, and that is not what I'm saying. Each one of you stands a chance because each one of you is putting in a lot of effort, which is evident from the very fact that all of you at least took the mock test on time and attended the analysis or are attending the analysis sessions. Right? So that's good. That you are serious about it. So bit effort, right, in the right direction. That is what will yield a better score. Right. So that is the analysis for this particular paper. Right. Thanks a lot. Thanks.